Chronicle. The candle in the gatehouse. Night settled over the castle not all at once, but the way a blanket settles, slowly, gently, until every stone feels its weight. The last cart had passed through the gates hours ago. The sound of iron-rimmed wheels on cobblestone had faded into memory, and the outer road lay empty beneath the stars. Above the gatehouse, the banners hung still. No wind troubled them. No voices called from the walls. This was the hour when the castle breathed out. Inside the gatehouse, where thick stone walls held the day's warmth a little longer, a single candle burned. It stood in a shallow brass holder on a wooden table, worn smooth by decades of hands. The table leaned slightly to one side, as all old tables do, as if listening more closely to the floor beneath it. The candle's flame was steady, not tall, not dramatic, just enough to push back the dark and soften the corners of the room. Its light touched the iron-bound door first, catching on the curves of old hinges and the faint scratches left by keys that no longer turned here. Then it drifted outward, over the rough stone blocks of the wall, over the narrow window slit, over the bench where guards once sat to lace boots and share quiet words at the end of a shift. Now the bench was empty. Only the candle kept watch. Beyond the gatehouse door, the castle slept. Courtyards lay still beneath the moon. Stables murmured with the slow movements of horses dreaming. Somewhere deep inside the keep, a door creaked as it settled into the night. But here, in this small room at the edge of everything, the candle held its ground. The watchman would return soon. He always did. But for now, the flame burned alone, patient and untroubled. It had been lit at dusk by a hand that knew its weight well. The watchman, an older man now, though the stones still remembered him young, had struck the taper against the wick with the same care he used every evening. Not as a ritual, not as a prayer, but as a habit shaped by years. Light first. Then the night may come. He had adjusted the wick, ensuring the flame would not smoke, ensuring it would last. And then he had stepped outside, boots echoing briefly under the archway, to make his slow circuit of the walls. The candle remained. It had watched hundreds of such evenings, thousands perhaps. It had burned through storms that rattled the iron gate until dawn, through celebrations that left the stones warm with laughter, through wars that never reached these walls, and through years so quiet they almost slipped past unnoticed. Tonight was one of those quiet nights, the kind that asked for nothing. The flame leaned slightly, then straightened again, as if breathing. Wax softened at its base and ran in thin, pale streams down the candle's side, pooling gently in the holder. Time moved differently here. In the gatehouse, minutes did not hurry toward anything. They rested. They stretched. The candle did not know how long it would be needed. It never did. It only knew how to burn. Outside, the stars shifted almost imperceptibly. The moon climbed higher, casting silver shapes across the courtyard stones. The flame answered with gold, and in that quiet exchange, silver and gold, stone and wax, night and light, the castle found its balance. The door creaked softly, not opened, just the wood adjusting, settling deeper into its frame. The candle did not flicker. It had learned long ago that not every sound means danger. Some sounds simply mean that the world is getting comfortable. A drop of wax fell with a barely audible tap. Another minute passed, then another. Somewhere along the wall, a footstep sounded. Slow, familiar. The watchman was returning, but the candle did not hurry to greet him. It burned as it always had, steady, quiet, unconcerned with praise. It would light his way back inside. It would stand beside him as he leaned against the stone and listened to the night. And when he sat, and the hour grew deeper, the candle would remain, because this was its task, not to shine brightly, not to impress, only to stay. The watchman entered without hurry. The heavy door opened just enough to let him slip inside, then settled back into place behind him with a sound like a sigh. He paused, as he always did, letting his eyes adjust, letting the candle greet him first. Its flame reflected faintly in the metal clasp of his cloak, in the smooth curve of his belt buckle, in the familiar lines of the room. Still burning, he murmured, more to himself than to the flame. The candle did not answer. It never did. But it leaned, just slightly, as if acknowledging the sound of his voice. The watchman set his spear carefully against the wall near the door. He loosened the strap at his shoulder, rolled his neck once, slowly, and let out a breath he had been holding since before he remembered. Stone was cold beneath his palm as he leaned against it. Outside, the night had offered nothing unusual. No movement along the road, no lights in the trees, no distant calls carried by the wind. Just the quiet order of things. He crossed the room and sat on the bench beneath the narrow window slit, the same bench where he had sat hundreds of nights before. The wood knew his weight. It creaked softly in greeting. He rested his hands on his knees and closed his eyes for a moment. Not to sleep, just to listen. The castle had a language of its own at night. There was the soft settling of stone, a low sound you felt more than heard. There was the slow shifting of air through corridors and arches. There was the distant, steady breathing of the great building itself. And there was the candle. Its flame whispered faintly, not in words, but in rhythm. The watchman opened his eyes again and reached for the candle holder. He did not move it far, only enough to bring the light closer to where he sat. Wax had pooled unevenly, forming little hills and valleys around the base. He turned the holder once, carefully, so the wick would burn evenly. A small thing, but small things mattered at this hour. He settled back against the wall and let his gaze drift. The candle's light traced familiar paths, the old scratch in the stone, where someone long ago had marked a shift change, the darkened corner where a helmet once hung, the spot on the floor where rainwater sometimes crept in during heavy storms. Tonight, the floor was dry. The watchman smiled faintly. It had not always been so. There had been nights, long before this candle, long before this gate, when water rushed in and torches sputtered and voices shouted orders into the dark. He remembered those nights as one remembers storms from childhood. They had been loud, yes, and frightening, but they had passed. What remained were nights like this, quiet ones. He shifted his boots, crossed his ankles, and let his shoulders drop. His breathing slowed. The candle burned. Time stretched itself thin. Somewhere beyond the walls, an owl called once, then fell silent again. The watchman listened until the sound faded completely. He did not reach for his spear. He did not stand. The owl was part of the night. And the night, tonight, was kind. The flame trembled once as a draft found its way through the stone, then steadied again. The watchman glanced at it, checking as he always did. Satisfied, he closed his eyes once more. This time he let them stay closed longer. Not sleep, just rest. Just enough to feel the bench beneath him, the wall at his back, the warmth of the candle near his knees. In the gatehouse, no one rushed him. No bells rang, no horns sounded. The candle would burn until it was no longer needed, and he would sit beside it until the hour turned. Minutes passed without announcing themselves. Wax continued its slow journey downward, shaping itself into new forms that no one would ever notice. The flame leaned, straightened, leaned again. The watchman's thoughts wandered, not toward worries, but toward small, ordinary things. The way the bread tasted at supper. The sound of boots being removed at the end of a shift. The weight of his cloak folded neatly by the door at home. He thought of nothing else. And that, he had learned, was the secret of nights like this. Not filling them. Not solving them. Just letting them be. The candle did not ask him to stay awake. It did not ask him to think. It only stayed lit. Outside, the moon edged closer to its highest point. Inside, the gatehouse held its quiet. And between stone and wax, between breath and flame, the night continued, unbroken, unhurried, and kind. There is a moment in every night that does not belong to yesterday, and does not yet belong to morning. It arrives quietly, without signal or sound, and settles itself between breaths. This was that moment. The watchman did not know the hour, and he did not need to. The castle itself seemed to soften, as if every wall had decided, together, to rest a little deeper. The candle burned lower now, its flame shorter, its glow closer to the wick. Still steady. Still enough. The watchman's breathing had slowed to match the room. In and out. Each breath smooth and even, as though the night were breathing through him. His hands rested loosely on his knees. His head leaned back against the stone, finding a familiar hollow, worn there by years of others who had leaned the same way. The bench did not creak anymore. It had accepted him fully. Outside the narrow window slit, the sky had deepened into a darker blue, the kind that seems almost soft when you look at it too long. Stars watched patiently. The flame wavered once, then settled, Wax had formed a smooth ring around the candle's base, a quiet record of time passing without complaint. If anyone had been watching, they might have thought nothing was happening. But this was the hour when the night did its most important work. Thoughts loosened their grip. Muscles remembered how to rest. Even stone, it seemed, allowed itself to settle. The watchman's mind drifted without direction. He did not replay the day. He did not imagine tomorrow. His thoughts moved slowly, like leaves floating on dark water, touching nothing, catching nowhere. A memory surfaced, not sharp, not demanding. A younger version of himself, standing in this same gatehouse, hands tighter on his spear, eyes alert for danger that never came. He felt no judgment for that younger man, only a gentle understanding. The night was kinder now, or perhaps he had learned how to be kind to the night. The candle had burned through such changes before. It had stood beside men who watched with fear, beside men who watched with hope, beside men who watched because it was simply their turn. It treated them all the same. Light was given freely. Darkness was held at a respectful distance. Nothing more was required. A faint sound drifted through the air, not from outside, but from deep within the castle. The soft settling of a door, the quiet shift of fabric as someone turned in sleep, the distant murmur of a dream finding its way back to silence. The watchman's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. He adjusted his position slightly, only enough to ease the pressure on his back. The stone was cool, but not uncomfortable. The candle's warmth reached him in waves, not hot, just present. He opened his eyes halfway and looked at the flame, not to check it, not to tend it, just to see. The flame leaned toward him, then straightened, as if acknowledging the shared watch. "This is a good night," he whispered, the words barely leaving his breath. The candle did not flicker. It agreed in its own way. Time moved on, unmarked. Somewhere far beyond the walls, the world continued. Roads stretched on, rivers flowed, fields slept beneath frost or dew. But none of that reached the gatehouse. Here, only the essential things remained: stone, wood, wax, breath. The watchman's eyes closed again, this time without effort. If sleep came, it would be light and brief, the kind that rests without taking you away. If it did not, that was fine too. The candle would burn regardless. It always had. And in the deepest part of the night, when even time seemed to pause and listen, the gatehouse stood quietly at the edge of the kingdom, guarded not by steel or command, but by a single, patient flame, and the man who trusted it. The deepest part of the night does not announce itself. It simply arrives, like a hand resting gently on your shoulder, and waits until you notice that everything has grown quieter. The watchman's breathing was slow now, so even that had blended into the rhythm of the gatehouse itself. Stone held its silence. Wood held its shape. The air felt thick with rest. The candle had burned lower, its flame closer to the pool of wax, its light softer, rounder, more intimate. Still enough to see. Still enough to stay. Outside the narrow slit of window, the sky had shifted again. Not brighter, but thinner. The stars seemed farther away, their light more delicate, as though they too were growing tired. The watchman stirred slightly. Not awake, not asleep, just adjusting to the slow turn of the hours. He shifted his weight and found a more comfortable angle against the stone. His cloak slid a little from his shoulders, settling into folds around him. The candlelight traced those folds without judgment. It did not hurry him. It did not demand that he stand or move. It understood this hour. This was the time when the night loosened its grip, not to release the world yet, but to allow it a deeper rest. Somewhere within the castle, a distant hearth sighed as a log collapsed inward. The sound was soft, almost affectionate. The candle responded with a faint lean, then straightened again. Wax continued its slow, careful descent, forming gentle curves and ridges that would never be repeated. Every moment was unique, and none of it mattered enough to be remembered. That was the gift. The watchman's thoughts, if they were still thoughts at all, drifted like mist along the ground. There was no shape to them now, no edges, only sensation. The cool stone at his back, the warmth near his knees, the quiet pressure of the bench beneath him. He might have dreamed. If he did, it was not of places or people, but of warmth itself, of light that does not ask questions, of rooms that hold you without needing your name. The candle had seen such dreams before. It had watched them pass across faces, soften hands, slow hearts. It knew when to burn brightly and when to burn low. Tonight, it chose low. The flame shortened, not in struggle, but in understanding. It was enough. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours. Time had lost its importance here. The gatehouse was no longer a place of watching. It had become a place of holding. Holding the night, holding the man, holding the quiet balance between dark and light. Outside, somewhere beyond stone and distance, the horizon began its slow, patient change. Not light yet, just the promise of it. The candle did not react. It had learned long ago that dawn does not rush, and neither should it. The watchman's chest rose and fell, steady and sure. If anyone had looked in, they might have thought him asleep. If they had stayed longer, they would have seen the truth. He was simply resting exactly where he was meant to be. The candle burned beside him, not as a guardian, not as a symbol, just as itself. And that was enough. The first hint of morning did not arrive as light. It arrived as a feeling, a subtle easing, as if the night, having held everything so carefully, had decided it was safe to loosen its hands. The candle had burned low now. Its flame was small, close to the wick, casting a gentler circle of gold across the stone. Still steady, still present. The watchman's breathing remained slow and even, untroubled by the quiet shift in the world. He had not slept deeply, but he had rested completely. There is a difference. The gatehouse felt warmer than it had hours ago, though the air had not changed. Stone remembered warmth. Wood remembered hands. Light remembered its purpose. Outside the narrow window slit, the sky softened from deep blue to something thinner, almost pale. Not dawn. Not yet. Just the promise that it would come eventually in its own time. The candle did not rush to meet it. Wax had gathered into a final, smooth pool around the base. The flame leaned once, then straightened again, as if satisfied with the work it had done. The watchman stirred, not fully awake, just enough to shift his weight and rest more comfortably against the wall. His hand moved slightly, fingers brushing the fabric of his cloak, then falling still again. He did not open his eyes. There was no need. This hour asked for nothing. The castle beyond the gatehouse remained quiet. Courtyards waited. Hallways held their breath. Doors stayed closed. Dreams undisturbed. The candle continued to burn until it no longer needed to. Not with urgency. Not with struggle. Simply until. And when the flame finally shortened further, when the wick glowed faintly and the light softened into something almost imagined, nothing was lost. The room did not darken suddenly. The night did not collapse. The gatehouse accepted the change the way it accepted everything else, without resistance. The watchman remained at rest, held by stone, by memory, by the knowledge that this place and this hour were safe. Outside, far beyond the walls, morning prepared itself. Inside, the candle had done exactly what it was meant to do. It had stayed, and that was enough. Chronicle 2, The Watchman's Quiet Hour. Elsewhere in the castle, far from the gatehouse and its fading candle, another quiet hour waited. It waited patiently, as all such hours do. Along the inner wall, where the stone curved inward toward the keep, a narrow corridor stretched between two towers. It was not a place meant for gathering. No banners hung here. No footsteps hurried through. It existed for passing and for pause. A single lantern rested in an iron hook along the wall, its glass clouded by years of smoke and time. The flame inside was low but steady, casting a soft amber glow across the stone. The watchman reached this corridor at the same point every night, not because he was told to, not because it was written anywhere, because the castle itself seemed to expect him there. He slowed as he entered, boots quiet on the worn floor. His steps had learned the space by heart. Here, the walls felt closer, not confining, protective. He rested his palm briefly against the stone as he passed, feeling the faint warmth it held from the long night. The lantern greeted him with a soft shimmer of light. He paused beneath it, just as he always did. This was his quiet hour, the part of the night that belonged to no one else. He leaned his spear gently against the wall and adjusted the lantern, turning it only slightly so the flame would burn evenly. The movement was slow, careful, almost thoughtful. The lantern had been here longer than he had. It deserved respect. The watchman settled onto the low stone ledge beneath the lantern, a place shaped naturally by the wall's curve. It fit him well. His cloak fell around him, folding into the grooves of the stone, as if it had always belonged there. He exhaled. The sound was quiet, but in the stillness, it felt like a release. In this corridor, the castle sounded different. The deep breathing of the great halls faded into the distance. What remained were smaller sounds, the faint whisper of flame, the slow settling of stone, the almost imagined echo of footsteps long past. The watchman closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. He was not tired. Not in the way that asks for sleep. This was a gentler kind of weariness, the kind that comes from constancy, from showing up, from staying. The lantern's light brushed across his hands, revealing the lines etched there by years of work and weather. He turned them over once, then let them rest again at his sides. Outside the corridor, the night continued its slow retreat. Somewhere, a bird shifted on its perch. Somewhere else, water moved quietly through old stone channels. Here, nothing asked to be done. The watchman listened, not for danger, not for command, just for the shape of the moment. The lantern did not flicker. It burned with the same patient confidence as the candle in the gatehouse, as every light that understood its place in the night. Minutes passed, or perhaps they simply stretched, soft and unmeasured. The watchman's thoughts drifted, not toward memories, but toward sensations. The cool stone beneath him, the warmth of the lantern above, the gentle pull of gravity holding everything where it belonged. He rested his head lightly against the wall, feeling its texture through his hood. This corridor had seen many nights, many watchmen. It had learned that this hour was not for vigilance, but for quiet understanding. The lantern continued to glow, marking nothing, signaling nothing, simply keeping the dark company. The lantern's light did not reach far. It was never meant to. It rested instead, gathered close to itself, softening the stone immediately around it and letting the rest remain as it was. The watchman breathed in, then out, allowing his breath to follow the same rule. Nothing pushed outward, nothing pulled away. He stayed where he was. The corridor seemed to narrow slightly, not in shape, but in attention, as if the castle itself had decided that this small stretch of stone was enough for the night. The lantern whispered faintly. Not a sound, exactly. More a presence, a gentle insistence that light was still here, that time was still moving, even if no one asked it to. The watchman's shoulders softened. He had learned over years to notice this moment, the one where effort releases its hold, where muscles remember they no longer need to prepare. His hands rested loosely now, fingers slightly curled, as though they had finally been given permission to stop holding anything at all. The stone behind him felt cooler, but not cold. It carried the memory of countless nights, each one layered gently over the last. The watchman leaned into that memory without thinking. Outside the corridor, the world grew quieter still. Even the smallest sounds, a distant drip of water, the faint shift of air, seemed to arrive more slowly, as if they too were tired. The lantern's flame leaned, then straightened. The watchman did not look at it. He no longer needed to. The light had become part of the room, part of his breathing, part of the hour itself. Thoughts drifted through his mind without weight. They did not stay long enough to become worries. They passed like clouds across a sky too wide to hold them. He noticed the feeling of his boots against the stone floor. Solid, familiar. He noticed the way his cloak settled around him, fold by fold, as though arranging itself for rest. He noticed the gentle rise and fall of his chest. In and out. Each breath slower than the last. The lantern continued its quiet work. It had no interest in marking time. It did not count minutes or watch for dawn. It simply stayed lit for as long as it was needed. The corridor accepted this without question. The walls did not echo. The floor did not respond. Everything held its place. The watchman's head tipped slightly to one side, finding a more comfortable angle. If sleep came now, it would be shallow and kind. If it did not, that was fine too. This hour did not demand anything from him. It existed only to be experienced. The lantern's glow softened the edges of the stone, rounding corners, turning shadows into gentle shapes that asked for nothing. Somewhere deep within the castle, a bell marked a distant hour. The sound arrived muted, as though wrapped in cloth, and then faded. The watchman barely noticed. He remained where he was, held by light, by stone, by the simple certainty that nothing needed to happen next. The lantern did not flicker. The corridor did not change. And the quiet hour continued, unbroken, unhurried, and whole. At some point, the corridor stopped feeling like a place. It became a state. The watchman no longer thought of walls or stone or lantern. He felt only balance, the steady presence of the floor beneath him, the gentle pressure of the wall at his back, the warmth above him, constant and unchanging. The lantern burned lower now, its light closer to the glass, its glow softer and more contained. It did not struggle. It had learned, long ago, how to last. The watchman's breathing slowed further, each inhale arriving as if invited, each exhale leaving without being asked. There was no rhythm to follow. The rhythm followed him. In the quiet hour, even memory grew tired. Names faded first, then faces, then places. What remained were sensations without stories attached to them. Warmth, support, stillness. The corridor held these things easily. It did not need to understand them. The lantern's flame leaned once, then straightened again, as though acknowledging the deepening quiet. The watchman's head rested fully now, no longer held upright by effort. His shoulders had dropped to their natural place. If someone had entered the corridor, they might have paused, not out of concern, but out of respect. This was not sleep. It was something adjacent to it, a place where the body rests before the mind follows. The lantern continued its soft glow, blurring the edges of the stone, making the corridor feel smaller, safer, more contained. Time thinned. Minutes lost their shape. Seconds drifted apart. Nothing marked their passing. Somewhere far beyond the walls, the sky prepared itself for change. Here, nothing prepared. Nothing needed to. The watchman's thoughts, if they still existed at all, moved like water settling in a bowl. No ripples, no direction. Just quiet presence. The lantern did not brighten. It did not dim. It remained. And in that remaining, The corridor became exactly what it had always been meant to be. A place where nothing is required, where watching becomes resting, and resting becomes enough. The quiet hour did not end. It simply began to thin. Not enough to be noticed. Not enough to disturb the careful stillness it had built. The lantern burned low, its flame smaller now, nestled close to the wick, like something content to remain exactly where it was. The watchman did not move. His body had settled into the corridor, as if it had always belonged there, as if stone and cloth and breath had reached a quiet agreement. Outside, far beyond the walls, the world shifted in ways too gentle to hear. The sky lightened by a degree so small it could only be felt, not seen. In the corridor, that change arrived as softness. The shadows lost their edges. The air felt lighter against the skin. Even the stone seemed less firm, as though it were remembering that it had once been warm. The watchman's breathing remained slow, but there was a subtle ease to it now. Not waking, not returning, just resting differently. The lantern's glow reflected faintly along the curve of the wall, a pale ribbon of light that did not ask to be followed. It existed only to exist. The watchman's fingers shifted once, barely enough to notice, then grew still again. If there were dreams, they were not shaped like images. They were shaped like comfort, like knowing where you are without needing to look, like trusting that the place holding you will continue to do so. The corridor accepted this quietly. It had seen many such hours. Hours where the night loosened without letting go. Hours where the body rested without leaving. The lantern burned on, patient and unchanged. It did not prepare for dawn. It did not resist it. It simply remained available for as long as it was needed. Somewhere, a bell might ring soon. Somewhere, doors would open. Somewhere, voices would return. But not here. Not yet. Here, the quiet hour stretched itself one last time, gentle and complete. And the watchman, held by stone and light, rested without thought, without effort, without need. Chronicle 3, the flame beside the sleeping king. Deep within the heart of the castle, far from gates and corridors, there was a chamber that rarely changed. It did not echo with footsteps. It did not hear commands. It existed in stillness. Thick stone walls wrapped the room in quiet, holding warmth the way hands hold a cup on a cold night. At the center of the chamber stood a wide bed, its wooden frame darkened by age, its linens heavy and pale. The king slept there, not as kings are often imagined, not guarded by tension or fear, not surrounded by whispered worries. He slept simply. His breathing was slow, deep even. Beside the bed, on a low table carved with fading symbols, a single candle burned. Its flame was small, careful, as though aware of the room it served. This was not a light meant to banish darkness. It was a light meant to stay. The candle's glow reached only so far, touching the edge of the bed, the curve of the table, the smooth stone nearest the floor. Beyond that, the chamber remained softly shadowed, undisturbed. The king did not stir. Dreams moved through him quietly, unmarked by urgency. The candle watched without watching. It did not count breaths. It did not measure time. It simply burned, offering presence rather than protection. The room seemed to breathe with the king. Stone expanded and released. Fabric shifted faintly. Even the air felt slower here, as though it had learned to move gently in this place. Outside the chamber, the castle continued its careful rest. Guards sat quietly at distant posts. Corridors held their silence. Lanterns burned low. But here, none of that mattered. Here, there was only sleep and the small flame that honored it. The candle leaned slightly, then straightened again. Wax gathered and fell in slow, patient drops. Each one landed without sound. The king turned his head just enough to settle more comfortably. His breathing deepened. The candle did not react. It had learned long ago that sleep does not need attention. It needs permission. And this room, this hour, gave it freely. The chamber held its breath only long enough to notice how peacefully the king slept. There was no tension in his face, no weight behind his eyes. Sleep had come to him the way it comes to those who are finally allowed to let go. The candle remained where it was, its flame steady and modest, never rising higher than needed. It cast a soft oval of light across the table and the floor, leaving the walls to their shadows. This room did not need to be fully seen to be fully safe. The king's chest rose and fell in a slow, familiar rhythm, in and out. Each breath carried him deeper into rest. The candle answered with patience. It had burned through many such nights. It had stood beside rulers and children, beside the sick and the well, beside those who carried heavy days and those whose days had been light. It made no distinction. Light was light. Rest was rest. The stone beneath the table felt warmer now, as though the candle's presence had soaked into it over time. The floor no longer felt cold. It felt settled. Outside the chamber, the castle remained quiet. No footsteps approached. No doors opened. The hour protected itself. The king shifted slightly beneath the linens, finding a more comfortable position. The movement was slow, unconscious, guided only by the body's knowledge of what it needed. The candle's flame leaned briefly, then straightened again. Wax continued its gentle descent, each drop a soft punctuation in a sentence that didn't need to end. If there were dreams, they were untroubled ones. Not stories of conquest or command, but something simpler. Fields without fences. Paths without urgency. Light without source. The kind of dreams that leave no memory behind, only a feeling that lingers in the body long after waking. The candle did not intrude. It did not brighten. It did not dim. It stayed. The room accepted this as it accepted everything else, without question. In this chamber, power rested. Not the kind that demands, but the kind that allows. Allows silence. Allows sleep. Allows the night to complete its work. The king's breathing slowed further, deepening into a rhythm that belonged more to the room than to him alone. Stone and flame and breath found a shared pace, and within that gentle agreement, The night continued, unbroken and calm. There are nights when even responsibility sleeps. This was one of them. The chamber no longer felt like a room. It felt like shelter. The candle's flame had grown smaller still, not from weakness, but from understanding. It gave only what was needed. No more, no less. The king slept deeply now, his breathing slow and full, as though each breath were gently anchored in the stone beneath him. The linens rose and fell in an unhurried rhythm. The candle matched it without effort. Light softened further, rounding the edges of the room until corners seemed to disappear. Shadows no longer suggested anything hidden. They simply existed, quiet and harmless. The walls did not listen. The door did not wait. Nothing stood guard here. Nothing needed to. The room itself held the night. If the king dreamed, the dreams were weightless. Not images, not stories, but sensations. Warmth without source, rest without condition, time without direction. The candle had seen such sleep before. It knew the signs. The stillness that settles not just in the body, but in the space around it. The way sound itself seems to lie down. The flame leaned once, then straightened, its movement so slight it barely existed. Wax gathered at the base, forming smooth curves that caught the light and let it go again. Each drop fell without sound. The king's hand rested open beside him on the bed. No tension remained there. Fingers loose, palm warm. The candle's glow touched that hand briefly, then moved on. It did not linger. It was enough to know that everything was as it should be. Outside the chamber, the castle held its breath, not in anticipation, but in respect. Corridors remained empty. Lanterns burned low. Stone remembered stillness. Somewhere far beyond the walls, the night began to thin. But here, that change did not matter. Here, sleep was complete. The candle continued to burn, not as a watcher, not as a symbol, but as a quiet companion to rest. And in that companionship, the chamber remained untouched by worry, untouched by thought, untouched by need. Only breath, only warmth, only the steady presence of a small flame beside a sleeping king. The night did not end. It only softened. The chamber remained unchanged, yet something in the air felt lighter, as though the darkness itself had begun to rest. The candle burned very low now, its flame close and gentle, cupped by its own warmth. It did not waver. It did not hurry. It had nothing left to prove. The king slept on, undisturbed by the subtle shift of hours. His breathing remained slow, deep, anchored in the quiet certainty that this place would hold him until morning arrived on its own. The stone walls seemed closer, not in distance, but in presence. They held the room the way hands hold a sleeping child, firm enough to support, gentle enough not to wake. The candle's light barely reached the far edges now. Shadows blurred into one another, losing any sense of boundary. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was revealed. Everything simply was. The flame leaned once, then straightened again. Wax gathered into a final smooth pool, quiet and complete. If there were dreams, They drifted without direction. No beginning, no end. Only a sense of being carried by something larger than thought. The chamber did not observe this, did not comment. It allowed. Outside, far beyond stone and silence, the horizon prepared for light. Here, that preparation did not matter. The candle remained, offering its last steady warmth to a room that no longer needed it. The king's hand shifted slightly, then rested again. No waking followed, no stirring, only continued rest. The night loosened its hold just enough to breathe, and in that breath, the chamber stayed exactly as it was meant to be. Quiet, safe, and complete. Chronicle 4, the corridor that never goes dark. There was a corridor in the castle that never fully surrendered to darkness. Not because it was important, not because it was watched, simply because it had learned how to hold a little light. It ran along the inner curve of the keep, connecting rooms that were rarely used to places that no longer remembered their names. The stone here was pale, smoothed by centuries of passing hands, and it reflected even the faintest glow with quiet generosity. Small lamps were set into shallow niches along the wall, spaced far apart, each one burning low. Not enough to guide footsteps quickly, just enough to reassure. At this hour, no one walked the corridor. No guards, no servants, no messengers. The castle slept deeply now, and the corridor was free to exist on its own terms. The lamps burned steadily, their flames barely moving, their light soft and patient. It gathered along the floor, rested against the stone, and faded gently into shadow before reaching the ceiling. The corridor did not mind. It had never asked to be fully seen. Time behaved differently here. Without footsteps to measure it, without voices to mark it, the minutes loosened their shape. Light did not travel forward. It lingered. Each lamp illuminated only its small circle, and the spaces between them felt neither empty nor threatening. They were simply quiet. If someone had entered the corridor now, they might have felt the urge to slow down. Not from caution, but from comfort. The air was still, cool but not cold, carrying the faint scent of stone and old lime wash. Nothing stirred. The lamps did not flicker. They had burned through countless nights like this one, and they had learned that stillness was their companion. Light rested here the way dust rests, without effort, without intention. Somewhere far away, a door closed softly. The sound did not reach the corridor. Here, the night remained uninterrupted. The lamps continued their quiet work, holding small islands of glow in a sea of shadow. And the corridor, neither asleep nor awake, held them all. The corridor did not lead anywhere in particular. That was its gift. It stretched on without urgency, stone after stone, lamp after lamp, each one identical in its quiet purpose. The light never grew brighter. It never faded completely. It simply remained. Walking here, if one were to walk at all, would feel like moving through a thought that has already decided not to become a thought. The lamps burned low, their flames tucked safely behind glass. their glow softened by years of soot and time. They did not cast shadows sharply. They blurred them. Edges lost their importance. Distances lost their meaning. The corridor did not measure itself. It existed between places, and so it learned how to let go of direction. The stone beneath the floor held the day's warmth faintly, just enough to be felt through boots, through fabric, through rest. The air did not move. It felt held. If the castle dreamed, this corridor was where the dream wandered when it no longer needed a story. Lamp followed. Lamp, with no expectation of arrival. Light repeated itself gently, never surprising, never demanding attention. The spaces between lamps were not empty. They were quiet. The kind of quiet that feels full when you stop listening for anything else. Nothing echoed here. Sound arrived, if it arrived at all, already softened, already willing to fade. The corridor accepted everything and kept nothing. Minutes passed, or perhaps they dissolved. Time was no longer useful. The lamps did not change. They did not signal the coming of dawn or the passing of hours. They existed only to ensure that darkness was never complete. And that was enough. The corridor stretched on, unconcerned with who might walk it or when. It had learned that constancy is a kind of kindness, and so it remained, quiet, unbroken, and gently lit. A place where the night could pass without ever feeling lost. At a certain point, the corridor no longer felt long. Length requires comparison. And here, there was nothing left to compare. Lamp after lamp became a rhythm rather than a sequence. Light. Pause. Light. Pause. Each glow identical in its gentleness, each shadow identical in its kindness. The corridor did not repeat itself. It simply remained consistent. The mind, finding nothing new to hold, began to loosen its grip. Thoughts slowed, then softened, then drifted apart. The stone walls felt smoother now, not because they had changed, but because attention no longer searched them for detail. The air seemed thicker, as if it had learned how to support stillness. Nothing moved. Nothing needed to. If footsteps were imagined, they would be slow, unnecessary, already complete. The lamps burned low, their flames barely visible. Their presence felt more than seen. They did not illuminate the corridor. They reassured it. Each small circle of light overlapped gently with the next, so there were no true gaps. Darkness was present, but it was never alone. The corridor had learned how to share. Time no longer passed forward. It spread outward, like warmth spreading through stone. Minutes dissolved into sensation. Seconds lost their edges. Only continuity remained. If the castle slept, this corridor was where its sleep became deepest. Not the sleep of dreams, but the sleep of holding. Holding shape. Holding silence. Holding light. The lamps did not count themselves. They did not wait for anything to happen. They had already done their work by being here. The corridor accepted this truth and rested within it. And somewhere, far beyond thought, far beyond direction, the night continued. Not moving, not ending, but simply being exactly as it was. Chronicle 5, a window lit until dawn. Somewhere high in the castle, above corridors and chambers, there was a window that stayed lit through the night. Not brightly, not to be seen from afar, just enough to keep the dark company. It looked out over the inner courtyard, where stone paths curved gently around a silent well, and the shapes of bare trees rested against the walls. The window was narrow, set deep into the stone, its glass uneven and softly clouded by age. Behind it, a small candle burned. Its flame was steady, protected from drafts by the thickness of the wall, and its light filled the narrow room with a calm, amber glow. This room wasn't important. It held no treasures, no records, no titles. It existed only to be used and then forgotten again. A table stood beneath the window, simple and unadorned. A chair rested beside it, its back smoothed by years of quiet sitting. No one sat there now. The candle burned alone. Outside the glass, the night lingered. The courtyard stones reflected a faint silver from the thinning sky, and shadows lay gently where walls met ground. Nothing moved. The candle's light pressed softly against the glass, not enough to escape into the night, but enough to warm the room behind it. Time moved slowly here. The room did not count the hours. The window did not measure the sky. They simply remained together, inside and outside, light and dark, held in quiet balance. The flame leaned slightly, then straightened again. Wax softened and gathered, forming smooth lines down the candle's side. The room accepted this without comment. It had held many such nights. Nights where someone had sat here, head bowed, hands resting on the table, watching the world outside grow quieter and quieter. Tonight, no one watched. And that was fine. The window did not need an audience. The candle did not need a task. They existed together, patient and unhurried, as the night thinned slowly beyond the glass. The sky beyond the window changed without announcing itself. It did not brighten. It did not glow. It simply became a little less dark. The candle remained where it was, its flame small and patient, as though unconcerned with what the sky was doing. Inside the room, nothing shifted. The table stood as it had all night. The chair waited without expectation. The stone held its quiet. The window pane caught the candle's light and returned it gently, softening it, blurring it, until it felt less like light and more like warmth. Outside, the courtyard slept on. Shadows lay where they had settled, their edges slowly thinning as the sky grew lighter by degrees too small to notice. The candle's flame leaned once, then straightened again. Wax continued its slow descent, each drop landing in silence. The room felt held, not awake, not asleep, but resting somewhere in between. If someone had entered now, they might have paused without knowing why. The air carried a sense of completion, not an ending, but a fullness. The candle had burned through the longest part of the night without effort. It had stayed lit not because it was needed, but because it could. The window offered no view worth studying, no movement, No signal, just the soft certainty that the world was still there, waiting patiently for those who would wake to it later. The candle did not watch the sky. It did not prepare for the day. It simply remained present in this small, quiet room until its task, if it had ever had one, was gently complete. The room accepted this the way it accepted everything else, without resistance, without thought. Chronicle 6, The Last Ember Before Morning. Just before morning, there is a moment when the night becomes very still. Not because it is ending, but because it has finished its work. In a small hearth at the edge of the castle, far from chambers and corridors, a single ember glowed. It was not a flame anymore, not truly, just a quiet warmth nestled deep among pale ash, holding on to the last memory of fire. The room around it was simple. Stone walls, a low bench, a bucket resting in shadow. Nothing stirred. The ember did not try to become more. It did not reach upward, did not spark. It simply remained, content in its small, steady presence. Outside, the sky had lightened enough to soften the dark shapes of the trees. Inside, the ember answered with warmth rather than light. The air held a gentle stillness, the kind that settles after a long night when nothing more needs to be done. The ember had burned through hours of quiet, through pauses and patience, through moments no one would remember. It had done so without effort. Ash rested lightly around it, forming soft curves that caught the faint glow and let it go again. Time moved slowly now, not stretching, not rushing, just resting. The castle did not stir. Doors remained closed. Footsteps did not return. The ember held the space for those still sleeping, for those who would wake later without knowing why they felt so rested. It glowed not to be seen, but to be felt. Warmth without brightness, presence without demand. The night, having given everything it needed to give, allowed itself to fade. The ember did not fade suddenly. It never did. It softened instead, its glow thinning gently, as if it were becoming part of the ash rather than leaving it. The warmth remained a little longer than the light. Stone remembered it. Air held it. The room accepted it without noticing the exact moment it changed. This was how mornings always began here, not with sound, not with motion, but with release. The castle stayed quiet. Sleep lingered in its walls, in its floors, in the small spaces between stones, where the night had settled and decided to rest. The ember rested too. Not waiting, not watching. Simply existing in the last calm stretch before day remembered itself. If someone were to wake later, they would not think of this moment. They would not remember the quiet hearth, or the soft ash, or the final warmth held just long enough. They would only feel that something had gone well in the night. That rest had been complete. The ember did not need recognition. It had already done what it was meant to do. The room did not change as the sky grew lighter beyond the walls. It held its stillness, allowing sleep to finish in its own time. And somewhere, between the last warmth of night and the first light of morning, everything remained perfectly at ease. Rest well, traveler. The Old Kingdom will be here when you return.